Hello and welcome to another episode of Go-To Tech Reviews. Last week, my brother-in-law approached me about shrinking his mini ITX build that we had done for him in this video here. He wanted a smaller form factor PC that he could fit and use as an HTPC in his living room. The Thermaltake Core X1 was good for his original uses, but he decided to turn it into an HTPC/file server. So we went ahead and got the Corsair Carbide Air 240. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the features and see why we picked this. Okay, so this is meant as a mini ITX, micro ATX, dual chamber type system. And the reason for the dual chamber is to kind of allow this different sort of shape and form factor, but it allows high airflow. So you're not obstructed with drive cages, cables, and PSUs. That is all handled in this back portion. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the features. So up front, we have kind of a similar Bane looking grill going on here, much similar to the Spec 03 that I reviewed in this video. And you've got your typical I/O up front. You've got two USB 3.0s as well as your microphone and headphone jack and a power and reset button. So, not too much there. There's no access to the filter other than just by popping this off. And in order to pop off the front, you have to pop off the sides. So there's a little bit of work into getting to the filters, but we'll go over that as we look at all the different portions. So let's go ahead and take a look at the main event here. You've got a side plexiglass window, which shows off all the good bits inside. So let's go ahead and put this off to the side. So there are standoffs in here for mini ITX and micro ATX. So you could do an SLI build in here. There are 4 expansion slots here, kind of on the back side. And while we're there on the expansion slots, there's this little retention bracket that you use instead of thumb screws. I thought that was kind of cool. So as far as fan support, you can do 220 millimeter fans up top, 220 millimeter fans up front, 220 millimeter fans on the bottom, and 2 80 millimeter fans on the back for exhaust. Though I wouldn't recommend using 80 millimeter fans. I've found them to be kind of loud and whiny. And we want as much positive pressure as possible, and this case more than delivers on that. So in order to look at the top a little better, let's go ahead and pop this top portion on, which is held on by 2 thumb screws. These are not held in, they're not retainable thumb screws, rather. Oh, and this will kind of give us a sneak peek of what the filter design is like here. So it's actually integrated into the side panels. There are a metric butt ton of screws to hold them in here, though you don't really have to take this out and take the whole filter out. There's really enough room for you to just take an air duster and blow all the dust out. So it's really not that big of a deal. So here we see where the fans fit. Now you're probably looking at this and thinking, well, would a radiator fit up there on top? Actually, it wouldn't. And the reason being is there is not enough vertical clearance here. It would start interfering with the motherboard. In terms of radiator support, there you can fit a 240 millimeter radiator up front and a 240 millimeter radiator down here on the bottom. So on the top, this is where the fans would go for the top exhaust. And you will also notice here on the top, I found this pretty cool. This is where you can put 3 SSDs, 2.5-inch drives, in this very cleverly placed SSD bracket cage. I thought that was pretty cool. So let's move around to the cable management and drive storage portion and see what we got. Let's go ahead and slip this side off. One quick note, this can be interchangeable with the side panel that has the plexiglass. And on this side panel too, you've got magnetic filters, so that's really nice. And this is where the intake for the PSU will be, and you can also fit another 120 millimeter fan to put some air into this side of the chamber as well. Though we won't actually be doing that in this particular build. I'm actually going to be building in this case for this episode, so I will give my thoughts, a post-build thoughts on the case afterward as well. So we take that off, and that reveals this back chamber here. This is where your PSU would go. It's going to be mounted sideways, and it gives you a lot of access to all these rubber grommets that go to the front. Here we see the Ssd cage, where there are 3 SSDs, as we mentioned earlier. The 3.5-inch drive bay, where you can fit 3 3.5-inch drives. You've got this kind of cage cover here, and you just use this thumb screw, and it pops that off and gives you access to the similar sled style that has these pins. Then there's a lot of room for cable management here in the back. You can just kind of let the cables go wherever, and it's not going to mess up the look of your build at all because it's all here on the showcase side. Okay, so let's go ahead and pop this top off. There are these little tabs here on the side that allow it to pop off, and then you've got the same on the bottom as well. Again, we can see the same kind of mesh filtering built into the front panel as we saw with the other side panels. And again, you can see this is where you would mount your 240 millimeter radiator up front. So really not much else to see up front here, so let's go ahead and take the bottom off. Again, we've got thumb screws for the bottom, and this slides right off. And like we saw with the other panels as well, there is the integrated mesh filter. And here is the fan mountings, where you could put 220 millimeter fans or a 240 millimeter radiator. So lots of options for cooling. I'm very excited about building in this. It should be really neat. Its dimensions are 12.6 inches by 10.2 inches by 15.6 inches and weighs only 12.35 pounds. It's really small, compact. It's going to fit in my brother-in-law's entertainment stand really nice. So the maximum PSU length is 240 millimeters. It's plenty. The maximum GPU length is 290 millimeters. Again, you're not going to have any problem here. It depends on how thick of a radiator you put up here. You could there's even enough room for a push-pull configuration up front here, which I think is pretty cool. Included fans are there's 120 millimeter fan up front, up top for exhaust, and 220 millimeter fans, the same type, which I believe they're the Corsair AF 120Ls. So by default, you have a positive pressure system, which will help minimize dust. The vertical CPU cooler clearance, there is 120 millimeters for cooling, so you're going to need some sort of low profile CPU cooler. What we decided to do, the NH-D14 was way too large for this, so we went ahead and went with the Noctua NH-D9L. It also comes with tools in here, so for fan mounts, your motherboard mounts, there's some zip ties, and there's also some radiator length screws in there, so that's pretty cool. One other thing I wanted to mention is that this is a very versatile case. It doesn't have to be in this standard vertical tower position. You could actually put these rubber feet here on this bottom chamber to allow airflow and have it sit like this. So yeah, that's pretty neat. You can even do an inverted build if that is your thing as well. So let's go ahead and build, transfer all the parts, and I will give a summary of, kind of some things I found while building. So let's go ahead and jump right in and do that. so there's the completed build in the Carbide Air 240 from Corsair. It was an extremely easy case to work in, as I suspected. There was just a couple small things that I wanted to note. The first off is that in order to get the 8-pin EPS connector, you have to kind of route it over the top of the motherboard. There's no cutout that I could tell, since the 3.5-inch drive bay is in the way. So do kind of plan for that. So it kind of makes the cable management at the top where the motherboard is a little tricky. And with that too, that vertical clearance there at the top there's not a lot of room. I tried to fit a 120mm fan there after I had the motherboard installed, and that 8-pin EPS was just enough in the way to really make it tricky. So I kind of repositioned all the case fans. So overall, I would give the Corsair Carbide Air 240 really high marks for its ease of use, fun to build in, gorgeous aesthetics, and real practical use of a little bit different form factor. The dual chamber, if you haven't built in one like that before, it's really nice and I highly recommend it. But in the end, it was a very rewarding experience and I'm glad I had the opportunity to do it. So if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. You can also follow me on Twitter to get more up-to-date information and some of the other projects that I'm working on. And as you can tell from some of the things around here, that there's a lot going on right now. I'm trying to stay as caught up as possible. I do work a regular job in addition to this. This is kind of a side thing. But you can also support us by using the Amazon affiliate links below in the description. And as always, thanks for watching, and we will catch you next week.